Okay, good morning, everybody. So last lecture, we want to bring the ethics to a certain level that now based on some foundation that hopefully we can go on, maybe deepen the knowledge because ethics is not just for the AI. So now we can start maybe look at specific things that apply to AI and see how we can eventually embed them in the general framework of ethics. So I want to start with some questions that Julia Bosman from Fathom Computing has posed in an article. Perhaps not the first one, but she has put them in some perspective. So I want to go over some of the questions. So one of them is, trucking in US is employing millions of people. So if the self-driving truck as promised by Tesla is implemented, so what happens to these people? Well, what we are asking here is basically the first thing that people are, with respect to the ethics of AI, is unemployment. But this is not new. This is not something just specific for the AI. So since 30, 40 years, as engineering has been increasing the level of automation, this question has been with us. The first project that I did as a young engineer, we automated counting glass pieces for auto glass quality control. And workers were counting. So they would just grab a sample glass, auto glass, they shatter it with a hammer, and then they draw 1 inch by 1 inch square on a blueprint of that shattered glass. And they would count the number of pieces of the broken glass in that 1 inch by 1 inch. And there were some norms. It has to be within a field. If it was too big, the glass pieces were too big, that was a danger. If there were too many of them, that was a danger. People were spending hours counting those glass pieces. So as a project part of my master's thesis, we automated that with computer vision. Back then, it was a big deal. That computer counts the number of glass pieces. So the day that we implemented and deployed that system, 7, 8 workers lost their job in that very plant. That was the first time that as an engineer I got conscious, oh my God, what I do may just put people out of their work. So this is not something new, but the magnitude is massive if it comes to it. So how do we look at this? Technology is great. The first ethical question is, will we as the ones who are doing AI, implementing AI, deploying AI, will we be responsible for unemployment? Why? It may not be a big question in your mind right now, but if you are the guy who is doing it, you have to deal with this question, at least at the personal level. Maybe the company doesn't care about it, but you have to deal with it. Another thing is, let's say if machines take over, and then how would we distribute wealth, which sounds in North America a very dangerous phrase to use, distribute wealth, and be fair toward contributions contributions in a post-labor society. That's the phrase that she uses. So assuming that we will go toward a society that basically we have to work less and less and less, so you get to a post-work, post-labor society. How would you, if you're even not talking about wealth distribution, who gets benefited from that? The programmers? The investors? If you have massive number of robots doing the job, generating revenue of some sort, who should benefit from that? So the question, the ethical question here that affects us in AI is inequality. So inequality may take new shapes and new forms that has not been there. It cannot be overemphasized how important these questions are for the young generation of computer scientists and engineers. It cannot be, because we have no clue how this would turn out. We have no idea. I know that many things that we are saying right now is over-exaggerated with respect to what AI can do, but we are going in that direction, that AI will be able to do more. So we will be dealing with type of inequality, and we have not got rid of the inequality that we have right now. So then on top of that, we get something very complicated, that massive number of robots generate wealth and money and revenue. And who would benefit from that? Yes?
So one fundamental question I have is, in a post-labor society, the entire principle of capitalism relies on the idea that labor generates wealth. In a post-labor society, where would wealth come from?
In the post-labor society, where?
Where would wealth come from? Because the
big question.
The principle of capitalism relies on that labor as a source of
We don't know. We don't know. If massive number of jobs have been automated, let's say, in 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, where do you make your money on the currency to pay for those services? Who does that? So we have no idea. We can speculate. But at least pocket-wise, in corners and parts and segments of the society, massive amounts of revenue and profit will be generated because of the massive level of automation, which then it's difficult to put, to really fairly say who should benefit from that. So another question that Julia Bosman poses, and many others do too, is that in 2015, a bot named Eugene Guzman won the Turing challenge in 2015, fooling more than half of the judges into thinking that they were dealing with a human being. So this is actually what we started with in the first lecture. We started with Turing test, and we said, Turing thought we can measure the intelligence by just asking questions, not knowing who is answering, so remote or hidden room, is it a human being or is it a computer? So, and we got close to that test, to have some meaningful measurements for that test by bots like Eugene Guzman, that now it can apparently fool many, many intelligent people. So that's encouraging, but that's also worrisome, because the ethical question here becomes the humanity, actually. What is, yes, it may be, probably is still too early to ask that question, I would say. but the relationships, what does it mean to be a human? At what level can machines and humans interact? And if I cannot distinguish between a machine and a human, which again, it is quite futuristic at this stage for us, but instances of it may happen. We may deal with some of it in some form that are not quite visible. If I go online and I chat and I say something pop-ups in the right bottom corner and say, do you want to chat? And you're chatting and the photo of a nice lady or handsome guy is there, but it's actually a computer. So where is the humanity in there? So it could be a frustrating experience, not an economic factor here in any way. But also, another thing that many people are asking is machines will make mistakes. So the question, the ethical question is that we have to answer here is the artificial stupidity. So what do we do with the stupidity of the machines? Somebody has to be responsible for that stupidity. People say ignorance can be cured, stupidity cannot. So what about machines? So if machines make mistakes, what happens? So what does it mean if machine makes mistakes? And at least in the past 2-3 weeks, we had 2 cases of that. So 2 cars, self-driving cars, making mistakes. One case killing another human being. So it's a serious thing. So another question is robots. And when I say robots, I mean in a really general form, not just a mechanical robot. When I go online banking, I'm dealing with a robot. That's a piece of software. So robots can be racist. Of course they are, and of course they will be, because we are racist. What do you think? They don't come from Mars. We designed them. So, and we put in their head whatever is in our head. So people are talking about this specific case, which is called compass algorithm. For calculating the likelihood of recidivism, which is the tendency of convicted criminals to reoffend. So there is this software is in use. It's a software. Judges use this software. Just recently in Wisconsin, it was used in a famous case that now many articles are talking about it. So it gets some information, and it's asked to a questionnaire to be filled, and then it gets, before the judge passes the judgment and said, you get 6 months, you are free, you get 10 years. Before the judgment is passed, what is the likelihood that this guy commit the same crime again? Based on that number, which is a stupid thing to do, but based on that number, the judge says, okay, so you're going to do this again, so let's lock you in for 10 years. Now, this is scary, especially because then ProPublica, which is established, well-respected organization, among others, they won a Pulitzer Prize. So there are serious people involved in that organization. They did a study and found out that compass is biased against blacks. So Compass doesn't like black people. They studied 10,000, looked at 10,000 cases, look at the recommendations, look at what really happened, and look at whether when the guy came out after the jail really did reoffend or not. And they found that in many cases, the Compass delivers high likelihood for the criminal, for the convicted criminal who was black, to reoffend. The guy, after some years, the sentence came out and didn't reoffend. And also, toward the white people, the Compass was, or as per the study, is biased, that says it will not reoffend. The people came out and they did reoffend. Well, we know this, that this is the ethical question that we have to deal with, which is the AI bias. I think in my experience, this is one of the most immediate dangers because we take data from the past to train stuff. Where does the data come from? So of course, if you get the data of New York City and put it in there, it will be biased or something. So you will not deal with everybody as this man, this woman is appearing here. I should just look at this case outside of the context of what it has been. But if your data is biased, your decision will be biased. And the worst thing is, now you're relying on something that you think is absolutely 100% objective. That judge will make the sentence and will sleep the sleep of the just. The computer told me 89% likelihood that this guy will steal cars again. Very dangerous, the AI bias, extremely dangerous. And if you look at some years ago, Harvard started a implicit bias project, fantastic project, implicit.harvard.edu. If you look at it, we have listed a huge number of biases that all of us have. And you have to, among others, for example, for their hiring, they started taking the names off. Anything that tells you what is the name of this applicant, where does it come from, what is the ethnicity, all that out, just the degree. Somehow the papers, without telling what is the name or whatever the contribution. Efforts like that, because we are very, very biased, all of us. So if you are biased, the program that you will write most likely will be biased. Most likely. So it's basically a given. So a last one from Julia Bosman. She lists more questions in that article. You can easily find that article. But so the last one that she lists is that the more powerful AI becomes, the more it can be used for destructive purposes. One might say, again, this is not new. Everything that engineers have built have been misused or abused or used for destructive purposes. Who do you think built the bombs that we throw at the Hiroshimas? Who? Philosophers? No, engineers. So, but this is, again, another magnitude. We are going now a big domain. So, in that sense, of course, cybersecurity is becoming very, very important. Cybersecurity becomes paramount. What happens if people have malicious intent and hack into your devices? Example for that, drones. Armed drones Aren't drones used? US has done it, UK has done it, Israel has done it. Aren't drones owned? They own it, but they have not used it yet. Iran has it. China has it. It's a question of time when they use it. And many others are looking into that. Now, forget about that the government are doing it, but what happened if you hack into this type of things and then use it against population, against, as we call it, innocent population? It's one of those words that I have never understood when we say kill innocent people, which implies there are some people who are not innocent, and you've got to kill them. Just being sensitive to words. So if we have technologies like this, the question that we are dealing with is the question of security. Even if you are completely ethical. So how do you make sure that your powerful AI agent does not get abused by others? So the question of security is paramount, is very important. So that's an ethical question. You have to make sure that your technology is an ATM machine or a drone. Cannot be hacked. Other people cannot use it against other people. So very important. Okay, so we leave Julia, and I want to look at other people, what other people are saying. The ethics of AI is relatively new. And only in the past 3-4 years, people have started to really deeply look into it, ask questions. So it's an evolving field. Another person maybe that I want to just take and lend some ideas is James Moore from Dartmouth College. So Moore talks about that computing technology is normative. So everybody is taking a different approach. There are 3, 4, maybe 5 different approaches to the ethical questions in AI. One of them is go to the core, is about computing. So it's about software. Computing technology is a normative technology, which means the purpose, it always proceed toward some objective. So the intended purpose serves as the norm. So this is what actually makes sense. This is not something new. In that sense, we have to just go back to it and say, computing technology is a normative technology. So you set norms, and your norm is completely defined by intended use. So what is the intended use of a nuclear power plant? Provide electricity. So that's the norm. So, and you have to protect it for that norm, for the intended purpose. If you have drones that are supposed to deliver Amazon packages to our homes, that's the intended purpose. The intended purpose is not to load chemical material and dump it on the city. That's not the intended purpose. So if we go back to that, maybe we can develop a different type of ethics. So one example that he uses is interesting, and I was just recently watching a documentary about that. Well, it's not directly about that, about something that involves that example. He talks about Camel Jockeys. So camel races. And the joke is usually it has to be a light person such that it's not additional weight for the camel. Let's go from drones to camels. So the person that rides the camel has to be a light person, not additional weight, such that the camel can run faster and the guy wins, and then he gets something in a frame and he can put it in the room and says, my camel won. So who has the light person? Boys. Meager boys, lean boys. So in some corners on this planet, young boys are enslaved as we speak. Young boys are enslaved with minimum amount of food per day such that they stay light and meager to serve as camel jockeys. Now, recently, there are robotic camel jockeys. And I was watching one that people actually build their own robots. The people are very innovative. Now you have a robot like this, is a quarter of the weight of the lightest slave boy you can find, and you mount it on the back of the camel, and with one arm it holds the camel, with the other arms it has the whip. It's a grotesque image to watch. And then some middle-aged men are screaming and running with the cars after them, whose camel will win. But this frees the slaved boys. So is AI doing good stuff too? Yeah, definitely. Sure. No slave boys to participate in camel races. But of course, does not solve the economy issues. economy issues that surrounds the problem. So should it? Well, maybe not. But when we are talking about this, we are talking about AI being, let me use his phrase, ethical impact agents. Ethical impact agents. That's what I like about what James Moore says. So AI is making ethical impact. And perhaps we will do it in both directions, in positive and negative, being ethical and being non-ethical. I find it extremely satisfying that those boys are not enslaved anymore, and they get more than one meal per day now, but they are still poor. Their homeland is still ruined. But this is not AI's fault, is it? So, but can we also do something about that? So if AI agents are ethical impact agents, to look at that way will give you a completely different world look. If you look at AI as agents that can make ethical impacts, something like this. Yeah, okay. So if we talk about, then he distinguishes between implicit ethical impact and explicit. If you do this, use a robot for the race, the slaves are free, but that was not explicitly in the mind and the programs of the robot to do this. So it's indirect, it's implicit. It's not explicit. We don't have robots that says, let's get on today and do something ethical. So is that possible at all? So for the first one, for the implicit one, for example, you have autopilot of airplanes. And you have web banking software as example. The autopilot in a 747 or A380 completely is programmed, get you there, no turbulences, fly smoothly, get safely down. Just in every piece of programming code concerned with the safety of the passengers and efficiency of using the energy. But it's not done out of an explicit ethical understanding. It's done implicitly. So it's done with an engineer eye, but with implicit idea that things should be good. So, but what about explicit ethical impact? While presently elusive. Presently we don't have explicit ethical AI agents. So agents that come to purposefully be ethical or purposefully do good things out of ethical motivation. So some people are trying to change that. I was searching and searching. It's not easy to find things like that at the present time, but there are some works that do that. So one example is that people try to build a bridge between machines and ethics. So this is proposed by Van den Hoven and Lockhorst. You can easily find the paper. So they talk about three things that an AI agent have to be explicitly ethical. So it's good that we start doing this, because then at some point, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 20 years, that's going to be part of the design process. It becomes norms. IEEE and HCM and other organizations will follow that. We have to. We have to, because otherwise there will be a lot of problems generated. So the Deontic Logic. So when we talk about duty and responsibility for statements of permission and obligations. So how do we do that? How do we bring in Deontic duty-based, responsibility-based statements in the AI agent to deal with permissions and obligations? Does the word obligation mean anything to the agent? If you want to have explicit ethical behavior, you got to do this. They talk about epistemic logic for statements of belief and knowledge. How do we do that? In how far is knowledge reliable? In how far the knowledge can guide us? So what is the difference between knowledge and belief? Knowledge is knowledge with a certain certainty. Belief is a construct of the mind. So how do we distinguish that in an ethical behavior? So if I have some knowledge, and based on my knowledge, I take an action, and that action is damaging, and then we find out that knowledge was wrong, and I didn't know about that, that's something. But acting out of belief, and then we damage somebody else, that's something else. Because belief is out of will for most of us. How can we this bring into AI agents? And of course, some sort of action logic for statements of action. So we have the last one, sort of. So we have the action logic. Do this, go left, go right, fly upwards, do that. So most agents have this. But we are missing these two parts. And that's the reason. So I would say this is implicit. And all together is explicit. Now, if you have AI agents like this, we cannot talk about machines with moral status. We can't. But if you have all three, we will have machines of moral status. So is somebody with severe mental challenge has a moral status? Not in any court of any democratic country on this planet. As somebody with severe Alzheimer's disease of moral status, can we hold him or her responsible for his or her action? Not in any serious, fair, just court in any democratic country. What about machines? So if this is this, you cannot. If they have all three, yes, you can. So another approach is what I like. So this guy's tried to bridge the gap. There is another work from Anderson, and Armin. The three authors implemented Jeremy. Jeremy is a piece of software. They called it Jeremy after Jeremy Bentham, the philosopher that we briefly talked about. So Jeremy tries now to be a more ethical agent by adopting some utilitarian idea of what is useful. So whatever is good must be ethical. Whatever feels good must be ethical. So whatever doesn't cause any harm must be ethical. So Jeremy estimates the likelihood of pleasure or displeasure for persons affected by a particular action. So now, if you have agents that does this, you are now going toward explicit ethical machines. So before the machine takes an action, makes an estimate, if I do that, will my owner like it or not? Sounds ridiculous at this stage. But if we don't do this, we get in trouble. I'm guessing we will not abandon AI technology. So that's my guess. We will not abandon it. So it's going to make progress. And in 50 years, if there are still oceans and we still have food, there will be also machines. So one of the things is, what do we do with all the environmental impact with the machines and AI? Will it make it worse? Or we will use now the AI technology to clean up some of the mess that we have created in the environment? Another ethical question, big ethical question. So if you can guess as an AI agent the magnitude of pleasure or displeasure before you take a particular action, which requires actually a lot of intelligence, you got to know your owner. So who is it that you are trying to serve? Sounds like a Hollywood movie. But again, I immediately go back and say, let's talk about an autopilot of A380, and then I can put it in perspective. So if I go with the high speed through the turbulence, would that please the passenger? Most likely not. Some of them will puke. Kids will scream. So it will be a lot of displeasure. very simple example, everybody would agree, yeah, so that if the program really can do that, okay, so 5 minutes later, go around the front. We don't have those type of things. In those type of situations, we turn off the autopilot, and the pilot takes over, because we cannot trust the machines yet. Okay, so all this, the attempt to become more explicitly ethical. Well, for the machines, of course. We are talking about the machines. And when I say a machine, again, I don't mean physical machine necessarily. I mean software machine, or a physical machine with software mind, because no machine without software has any AI. So AI is about software, of course. So, okay. Another example, some questions. Mark Sperewak from University of Edinburgh. So Mark asked the question, some questions. Should AI be used to kill in warfare? Aren't we already doing this? Many people are sympathetic to President Obama. He made massive use of drones. Many people were killed. Is that ethical to use AI to kill? Well, I'm not killing anymore. The machines are killing. Could be a cheap argument to get out of some of the controversies. So drones. Another question that many are asking, among others, Sperewak, is what sort of ethical rules should self-driving cars use So drones and self-driving cars are quite used as examples because they are happening. Utilitarian question, self-driving car. Either I have to go in this direction, kill 3 old people, or I go in this direction and kill 20 kindergarten kids. Very crude type of question. But people have to ask these questions. And we use this type of drastic situations that may never happen. They may never happen. Yeah, old people, kindergarten kids. Well, so, but if it happens, what are the rules for the self-driving car to take the least harmful approach? What is the ethics? I'm guessing we will not invent new philosophies for this. We have to go back again, start from Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, come to Jeremy Bentham and others. And if language is not clear, we have to consult people like Wittgenstein again and say, okay, what should we do? So everybody cooks with water. We cannot become more ethical now because we have AI. We are as ethical as we are. So what sort of ethical rules should we put in self-driving cars? We just had recently 2 accidents, one of them fatal. And this will happen. These are at the test phase. Now, when we deploy it, it will happen again and again. Who is responsible for that? Who is responsible? Whenever an airplane crashes, so agencies rush. They have go teams on the go 2 hours after every fatal crash, a full team of experts is there. Stakes are high. The companies, Boeing and Airbus, governments, airlines, people, passengers. And this is one of the climax of our technology, the airplanes, is drastic. We have 2, 3, 4 fatal crashes every year out of 35 million flights. But when it happens, everybody gets upset. This is the peak of the human technology. 300 people get there. They are watching movies and eating and laughing, and then suddenly it crashes. Everybody dies. We don't like that. We don't want that. It has to be immediately clarified whose fault was it. And if it was a fault in the mechanic or software or anything else, we will take action. This is one of the fastest changing technologies there is, and we change it. So do this, do that, change this, change that. It could be just a small screw that has to be changed. And we ground several thousand of airplanes to enforce that change. So we are doing this sort of stuff, but now we are getting in a different magnitude. Okay, so I want to get more examples from Nick Bostrom. Nick Bostrom, Eliezer Yudkowsky. So it's a 2011 work that they have put forward. One of the things I like about what they say, especially Nick Bostrom, is he points to the most important criterion in AI ethics. What is it? What is the most important thing? He says, and also in this paper with Yudkowsky, they say AI algorithm must be robust against manipulation. If we cannot do this, there will be no ethics, there will be no AI, there will be no benefit, there will be a lot of bad blood. A lot of economical damage. AI technology has to be robust against manipulation. Why is that? Because if it is robust against manipulation, then it is self-contained, that every time that something happens, just the developer is responsible for it. But if you allow it to be manipulated, then who is responsible? Somebody sitting in some basement 5,000 kilometers away just hijacks your drone and does something stupid with it. So then who is responsible? Perhaps it's still you, because you didn't make sure that your AI agent is robust, cannot be manipulated. This is by far, and this is why, for example, adversarial attacks in deep learning is a point of concern. We cannot use it in medicine. It's a problem. You have to be reliable. You cannot be manipulated easily by others. So the most important criteria, if I have just to pick one and mention it for AI in AI ethics, is it cannot be manipulated. So it has to operate as it has been programmed to operate. My blacks are giving up. Sorry that I'm using reds a lot. So examples that they mention is machine vision in airports. We all rely on that. It is just next time you go to the airport, see how patient people are. You can watch and find smokers who have not smoked for 8 hours, and they patiently wait to go through the security because we all appreciate to sit in the airplane with peace of mind and enjoy a movie and get to our vacation. So we accept it, that it takes a lot of effort to make sure that everybody is secure. Now, what happens if somebody puts a shape right beside the weapon to make it unrecognizable for the machine vision? What happens if I can fool your machine vision algorithm? Going back to the being manipulated. So, for example, shapes that would neutralize recognition of weapons. So back in, I don't know, late 90s, beginning of 2000, a technology was emerging called terahertz technology, a new type of imaging. Terahertz spectrum is completely unused. We have problems with generating and receiving terahertz waves. So many countries were putting money because you can, every element, every material on this planet has a distinct fingerprint in terahertz spectrum. You can look at something, you can send waves, get the response and say, this is flour, this is TNT. And then the governments jump on it. Oh my God, finally I have a technology that if somebody is approaching me and he has some explosive, we can recognize it. Yes. But if you put a wet towel around you, technology could not see it. So after millions of dollars, people gave up. Every technology can be fooled. So how can we avoid that AI technologies that are supposed to give us service and safeguard us, they are not fooled by people with malicious intents. There will be always people with malicious intents. It has always been, there will be. So we have to just safeguard everybody else who wants to go about their life, go to work, have some life, enjoy life, that they can do it. So an AI is not much different in that regard. So now, when AI fails, who is to blame? Is it the programmer? Is it the end user? Who is it? Who is to blame if the AI fails? Again, going back to the autopilot examples that we know, we have many instances for. One of the most advanced 747 crashed with a new generation of software for autopilot that was super sensitive. So, and 2 months after it was deployed, the airplane was bought. So the pilot let his son into the cockpit. And the son sits on the seat of the pilot, his dad, and takes the control. But it's in autopilot, so nobody's worried. He cannot do anything. So he's just playing around, the 16-year-old boy. And then 5 minutes later, the airplane crashes, kills 350 people. What they didn't know, that new generation of autopilot had continuous learning. So that if you, for extended period of time, more than 10 seconds, do something, then the autopilot would say, oh, okay, the pilot wants me to make a slight adjustment to the left, to the left, to the left, and then suddenly you are crashing. Who is responsible for that? Boeing? The pilot? The airline? Normal stupidity of us human beings? Who's responsible for that? Why did it happen? Why did it happen? The autopilot started, watch that. National Geographic has that. Just search for it. You will find it. So it's 50 minutes documentation. From perspective of engineering, a scary case. Very scary. Okay. So what Nick Bostrom says is also interesting, that he says, actually, guys, relax, because all criteria applied to humans performing social functions must be applied to AI. Must be applied to AI. So he's saying, guys, fundamentally, we do not need to invent the wheel again. You have to be responsible as a human being. You have to be transparent. Transparency. This is where I have problem with some part of deep learning. I don't know how a deep network makes decisions. We are not talking about telling me finding the photo of my grandma in my photo album on my laptop. That's okay. Making mistakes, find my grandpa instead, that's fine. We will have a laugh and we will continue. Sensitive applications. Transparency. I want to know, how did you arrive at that decision? When we have more complicated type of networks. Auditability. We must be able, like we do audit humans, we must be able to audit AI agents. Especially if our agents, as it will happen, will be type of evolving software. They will evolve. So we have to audit from time to time to see where are they. Not that they get out of control and then suddenly, in spite of, we made fun of it all the time, ha ha ha, Terminator will not happen. Maybe it does in some way, sometime down the road. If we cannot audit AI agents with evolving capability. Do we have some of them? We have some of them. They are deployed, most of the time in the hands of governments, because they have millions of dollars they put into it. So, but they will penetrate the market soon enough. Incorruptibility. Incorruptibility. Well, we wish that humans in social functions are not corrupt. And we also audit them to not become corrupt. Can we do that? Can we also check that? Can we make sure that AI agents are not corruptible? They do not become corrupt over time. Can they go astray? Yes, of course. If we just implement them and release them into the real world, they can become corrupt. They degenerate into something else that was not the intended purpose. And of course, predictability. Can we predict? You can ask any, so what is the likelihood that tomorrow the president of our southern neighbor will post a tweet and say something about a Hollywood star? Well, you can predict that. People are predictable somewhat. Countries are predictable. Organizations are predictable. How likely is it that University of Waterloo tomorrow get rid of the co-op system? 0. Why should we? So what Nick Bostrom says is this. So we accept this, and this list is not exhaustive. Of course it is not. Because human mind is very, very innovative in being corrupt and becoming corrupt. So you have to put many, many things in place to we safeguard each other all the time. We control each other all the time, because otherwise things can go wrong. So he is saying the same things we have to do for machines, because machines are reflections of us. So what part of it is not clear? So machines will be reflections of us. We have to do the same things if they are instances of us. We have to take every control measure, as an infamous man has said, trust is good, but control is better. He said it in a totalitarian context. I don't like that context, but he had some point. Sometimes wrong people say the right things, but they want to misuse it for their own purpose. Okay. So far, the problem is this, that we are actually dealing with weak AI, and weak AI is at the moment implicitly ethical. But what about strong AI? That one has to be explicitly ethical, otherwise we will have trouble. And when we talk about strong AI, we mean human-like intelligence, human-level intelligence. People know that. If you go to AI conferences, people are talking about it, that what we have right now, as impressive as it is for the masses, is weak AI. It's local, it's focused, it's customized. It can do one thing. So we will move toward artificial general intelligence. AGI, not AI. This is the future. We are moving toward AGI. Because the AI that we have right now is weak AI. It's too customized. It's just doing one job. It cannot do more than that. So the Deep Blue and AlphaGo can only do one thing. Can only do one thing. They cannot do anything else. This is not AGI. This is weak AI. So this is terminology established if you are deeply involved in AI research, you go to AI conferences, people are talking about AGI. There are courses at some institutions about AGI. We are just getting started. We know that what we have is not really intelligence. So you train this to beat the hell out of Kasparov. Oh, okay, that's impressive. But that's all you can do. You can only play chess. You can only play Go. You cannot do anything else. And that after years of training. That's not very impressive. What we want is AGI. And may God help us with that, because we are starting to do damage with the weak AI. So if you are not prepared, and now at this moment, we have to realize why it's necessary to talk about the ethics of AI. So human intelligence is applicable generally. You can grab any human being and you can ask some math questions, some questions about art, some question about philosophy, some question about woodworking, some question about plumbing, some question about the mortgage market, and he or she, regardless of the social status and what country, he or she has some answers for you. Some answers. Maybe he or she is not super knowledgeable or doesn't have a PhD degree, but as a human being, he has some answers for you. Human intelligence is general. Human intelligence is not customized. Does not play just chess. It does many other things as well. So, weak AI is local and specific. So just play Go. It's local. It's just one small tiny part. And very specific. Being specific is the opposite of intelligence. You cannot be too specific. Have you seen people who just work in their own field, have a PhD, and they're working since 40 years in a specific field, and you ask them, what do you think about the watermelon? And they don't have a word to say about watermelon. We become stupid when we customize too much. Just one field, just do one do. When we do that, we become professional morons with a PhD. So what about strong AI? Strong AI has a component of non-local optimality. If you have a strong AI, it cannot be local, and it has to have a global understanding of optimality, which is very difficult. So what does that mean? This means clearly being able to extrapolating the distant consequences of actions. This is what it means to be non-local optimal. So what would happen if I say this? What would happen if I do this? What would be the impact on the user, on the people who are using this service, this machine, this software, this device? So a strong AI has to be able to extrapolate, look into have some understanding of the impact. How would people feel about this? So if you don't have that, there is no way we can use a strong AI. So AGI, as it is defined, thinks like a human engineer, concerned about ethics, not just a simple product of ethical engineering. I'm quoting Bostrom and Yudkowsky. So AGI thinks like a human engineer concerned about ethics. So a human engineer concerned about ethics, not just a simple product of ethical engineering. Very different. So what we have right now, we have many products of ethical engineering. The engineer is a good guy, and you sit down and say, let's come up with a good, useful product. That's ethical engineering. Ethical engineering is not AI ethics. AI ethics is the machine can, like a human engineer, be concerned about the consequences of its actions. We are not there. It's good that we are not there because we are not ready for that. We are definitely not ready for that. We have to go through a lot of dialogues and debates and discussions. And we need courses, and we need new programs, and companies have to do their contribution and take charge and come up with new products and talk about it. And we have to get the feedback from other people, and then maybe step by step, we get somewhere. Okay, so some of the problems are that verifying safety becomes more challenging. Because we have we have to verify what the AI agent is trying to do. So we put pilots in simulators. We go through what the autopilot does, what the pilot does. Everything is pretty much predictable. But the problem with the safety of AI machines become increasingly that we have to first figure out what are they trying to do. Because you gave an autonomous capability to the machine. So if it is autonomous, now you have to first figure out, before you can answer the question of safety, it's not a piece of rules like we have in autopilot. Autopilots are not autonomous. They are not autonomous in that sense that we have autonomy in AI, the understanding of it at least. So you have to first figure out what is it trying to do. Then you can take action for safety. That's the challenge. That makes building ethical machines very difficult, because if you give them autonomy, how do I make sure that they are safe? Because then I don't know. They could be in a mode, they take actions that they have never taken before. AlphaGo was a good example for that. That was a game, but then everybody was saying, now it will do this, and it did the opposite. How do I know? How can I answer the question of safety if I don't know what the agent is trying to do? Because I gave freedom to the agent to do whatever it wants to do. Okay, and the last one, there are many others. The last one, ethical cognition itself must be taken as a subject matter of engineering. So this is one of the most recent recommendations, that if you want to be safe, if you want to have good machines, if you want to enjoy the AI technology, if you are not going to be afraid of unemployment, if you're not going to be afraid of self-driving cars and trucks going crazy on the highways, and drones dropping, I don't know, unpleasant stuff on top of our heads, then ethical cognition has to be a subject for engineers. Machines that can recognize what is wrong, what is right. Whole different thing. Maybe we will develop engines that are universally applicable, and we will just license the ethical engine in. Maybe. This is not maybe some big companies will. You are the young generation, maybe somebody will do it. What about, we have libraries, we have DLLs, why not? Why not have libraries of ethical rules? So, and then the machines can pick it up, because those rules, at least most of them, we can agree upon on this planet. It's not nice to kill people. It's not nice to drive your car into a crowd. Can we put this ethical cognition in some way, making it accessible to machines? So if they become explicitly ethical, then most likely we can use them much more efficiently and to our pleasure. So this is not a discussion that we can consider finished. So people are just getting started on this. Very important. I don't think being an AI expert or AI engineer or AI computer scientist is just about knowing that I can use TensorFlow and Python is good and I have scikit and I have sklearn and other things. This is also part of it. And trust me, companies and governments and organizations will appreciate that if they realize you have some understanding of the ethical side. So we are at the end of the lecture. I hope you have learned something in this course. Most of you will unfortunately disappear. So stay around, stay in touch. All the best. And I will be in touch for the last quiz today. Take care.